Welcome to the Self-Storage Insight Podcast. I'm Ben Shirey, and today I'm going to be talking about common fees in self-storage, the fees that you should be passing to your tenants, the fees that you should be charging your tenants, and maybe some fees to caution you from, or maybe some fees that your facility should stay away from. So over the last few years, we've had the privilege of working with facilities all over the United States, tons of different operators and managers and management companies, and seeing how different companies are managing their facilities. And so we get a ton of data back in terms of, what's working for facilities, what's not working for facilities, what drives move outs, things like that. And so in today's episode, I'm just going to be talking about the common fees that we see, the things that you should definitely be having implemented at your facility, and then some other practices that we're seeing that are either effective or ineffective, and kind of just talk about some of the differences between different types of fees, and maybe some fees that you didn't think of that you could possibly implement at your facility, or just caution you in some of the practices that you're about to implement. So we'll go over the common fees first. I would say, obviously, and I'm not going to spend any time on these, would be your late fees, your overlock fees, your lockout fee, or your admin fees. Those are things that if you're not charging those three things, your facility is for sure leaving money on the table. Every other facility is charging these fees, and it's best practice. It incentivizes payments. It generates revenue for your business, and your your customer expects to pay these fees. So one thing I always like to think about whenever we are discussing implementing fees or bringing in an additional fee that you're gonna pass to your tenant is there a way for your tenant to avoid paying that fee? If there is a way for the tenant to avoid paying a fee, then it's a no-brainer for your facility to implement, because it's up to the tenant whether it's paid or not. A late fee, a perfect example. If I pay on time, I don't get charged the fee. That is never a case where your tenant is going to feel like they're being feed to death. It's avoidable. It's their fault. They paid late. You charge them a fee. You should never feel bad about that. It's also easy to implement. It's easy to manage. And it's an easy conversation to have when somebody calls in upset about a late fee. It's very clear. There's a very clear guideline for how it's implemented. So as we get into some of these other fees and some other fees that your business could be thinking about, they're not going to be quite as cut and dry. However, I do like to always preface those by saying, if it's an optional thing for the customer and they can avoid it, then implement it, because you're not going to get a lot of pushback from it. It's easy on your management team to implement and to manage. So one of the ones that we've seen a lot of that's been very effective has been mailed invoices. We work with a lot of older facilities that are upgrading their software, and they're trying to modernize their business and to kind of streamline their operations. And so we work with a lot of companies that are still mailing invoices. Again, this is a practice that takes up management's time. There's actual cost with it. You have to buy stamps, envelopes, paper. So you should definitely be charging a fee if your customer still wants a mailed invoice. So some of the things that we've seen implemented that have worked really well is on the last invoice that you're going to provide when you send it out for free, put a little note on there. If you're using something like CC Storage, we also include a QR code, and you can put a note with the invoice and say, hey, scan the QR code above to add your email address to get online notifications or electronic notifications. And then if you don't do that, next month, there's going to be a $4 fee to receive a mailed invoice. And so again, it gives the customer the clear option to choose to not have to pay that fee. And you're not going to get a lot of pushback on that, because most people then will they'll add their email address, and it will help get your business a little bit more streamlined and remove some of the management processes that you're going through. So it's either going to save you time, or you're at least going to offset the cost of doing that process by bringing in some revenue. So small things like that can really boost the efficiency of your facility, mainly because it's going to drive people to pay electronically, to move towards electronic notifications and that sort of thing. So that's been one that we've seen that works really well. Some other ones that are pretty obvious, again, would be your tenant protection plans, right? And so I'm just going to touch on these for a little bit, because there is still a little bit of there's a little bit of a shift in the market. A lot of companies are now requiring tenant protection plans to be added. It protects the facility. It generates more revenue for the facility. But there are a couple things that you should consider whenever you're adding these and requiring them, is that if your tenant doesn't have an option to get rid of it, and again, whenever you require it, they can upload proof of insurance and they can remove the fee that way. However, when they are initially signing up for the protection plan, they're going to be adding a $10 to $12 fee onto their monthly rent, right? So in most markets, this is taking, an $80 5x10 up to $90 to $95. And the problem with that in some cases is that, you're generating $3 or $4 off of that additional revenue. However, when your tenant gets their bank statement, because again, they're probably not looking at the invoice that's sent to them or emailed to them, they're going to be on auto pay. These are modern facilities. They're going to see a $95 charge, right? They're not going to see a broke out line item for it. And they're going to kind of forget like, oh, that's my tenant protection plan. Well, one of the things that we're seeing that's happening a lot now is markets are getting more and more competitive, and a lot of promotional offers are being presented on Facebook. Just in the last week in my area, and again, prior to a year ago, I never saw an ad for a storage facility. Nobody was marketing really well with storage facilities. However, because of the increase in supply and demand is still good, but there's additional supply that's available. Everybody's having to get a little bit more business savvy on their marketing, and people are using Facebook ads in their marketing. And I've got 3 ads from different storage facilities just in my area on Facebook, all of them promoting a move-in special, right? So whenever I'm getting this ad and I see, hey, 50% off for the first 2 months, or get your second month free, or whatever move-in special they're running, the things that you're not seeing again on that are all of the other fees that are going to be added to those invoices. And so they're showing me, hey, I can move in for $45. And as a consumer, the thought is, oh, wow, I'm paying $95 right now. I can move in for $45 to the same size unit at this facility for a couple of months. So those are things that your consumer is going to think about. So while you're, forcing them to pay additional revenues for their protection plans and things like that, there also is going to be additional considerations that your customer is going to make whenever they see ads for these things and that sort of thing. So just make sure that you're being smart about your market, understand the other businesses in your area and what they're doing to try to get your customers, and make sure that, the fees that you're implementing and adding make sense to your tenants and that they're very clearly communicated all of the time so they know exactly what they are paying for. So those would be a couple of the common fees that we're seeing. Also, other things would be anything that relates to the auction process, lien letters being sent. If you're in an area where you have to mail a certified letter still, or depending on the communication that you have to have through that process, make sure you are offsetting your costs for all of those things and passing that on to the auction process, as far as most of that's going to be written off with the auction of the unit, and make sure you're charging fees for all of those things as they go through the process. A couple other very common fees are going to be insufficient funds or NSF fees for return checks, things like that. Now, there is some things that are shifting in the industry a little bit in terms of, if you're using a storable product, they just started to pass a fee for declined card transactions. Most companies are charging you as the business owner, between $20 to $25 if there's a return payment on ACH. And so those are costs that you definitely should be offsetting by passing those onto your tenant if you're working with a processor that's charging you for those things. It's very clearly communicated to the tenant. Make sure, it comes out, it's a separate line item on the invoice, it's a separate invoice, something like that. And then that the tenant clearly understands that it's their fault that this fee is being charged and that it's a cost to your business. Those things should always be implemented. Don't absorb the cost for those return checks and those payments. Make sure you're passing those onto your tenant. Again, they're very easy to implement. They are very easy to manage. And there's a very clear distinction to the customer about what that charge is for. The one other one that, again, a lot of companies are implementing, a lot of industries are implementing, is the cost of card processing and charging a different rate for card versus cash. And that way your tenants realize that they're paying for the convenience of running their card. This is widely accepted. Consumers are more and more used to seeing these types of transaction fees or the different pricing that they're going to pay when they pay with a card versus cash. And so it's getting easier and easier to implement this type of thing. So you can offset the cost for your business by passing those fees to your tenant. And again, clearly communicate it with your tenant, and they'll be fine with paying those costs. Those are real costs to the business. They are also, in almost every case, avoidable to the tenant because they can pay a different way and not have to pay that fee. So it's not a rate increase, it's a different fee, and they can choose whether or not they have it. So again, as I go over common fees that your businesses should be implementing and that you guys can get away with charging, again, the common thing here is it clear to the tenant what it's for? Is there value that's added to the tenant for charging this fee, or is it avoidable by the tenant? So those types of fees are widely accepted. They're fine to implement. You should not feel bad about implementing any of those things. And again, they're going to be accepted by your customers. They're not going to drive move-outs. They're not going to drive churn at your business. And again, just widely accepted, very common fees. Maybe you guys are already implementing all of those and running your business as efficiently as possible and trying to bring in as much profit as you possibly can. If you're not, I highly recommend most of those things that I just mentioned in the previous is all of those fees that you can get away with. Some of the ones that you should probably try to avoid or that we've seen that drive a little bit more turnover or create awkward situations for management are things like facility fees, maintenance fees, or move-out fees, right? So some of these fees, again, are implemented at facilities and there may be a reason that they're put in place. However, when you throw a line item or a recurring invoice item onto your lease that says it's for a facility fee or for a maintenance fee, those things feel like to the customer they should be included with your rent, right? They're not bringing any additional value to the consumer. They're not avoidable. And then when all of a sudden they start showing up with facility fees and maintenance fees and $3 and $4 a month charges that are just added on to their invoice, and there's no way around it, those are the fees that you're going to start to get more pushback on. And again, companies are implementing these, and in some markets they work and can generate additional revenue. Again, there's no cost for your business for these things. And so it is just 100% profit for your business to implement these things. And that's what a lot of people see when they do it. However, make sure if you implement things like that, that you're looking at what is my churn on the units that I didn't implement this on? What is my churn on the units that I did? And make sure that it actually makes sense to try to get those $3 and $4 and $5 extra out of your customers every month versus maybe your tenants that didn't get hit with this invoice. So, as far as implementation, I would always recommend don't hit your entire facility with this at once. Let's parse it off into a couple of different pieces. Let's implement it to, your half of your 10 by 10s and half of your 5 by 10s. And then let's see how the consumers behave that got the fee versus didn't get the fee. And you can really kind of get a data metric of, is it going to work? Is it going to be accepted? And you definitely don't want to push it across the whole facility and then drive move outs across your whole facility at once. So be a little bit creative about how you implement these things. Make sure they're not actually hurting your business, even though you're just trying to generate a little bit more revenue. In some cases, it actually makes more sense to just do a rate increase than it does to throw the fee on. And again, I've also talked to business owners that have done this and it's worked and they've increased their revenue and they haven't had move outs. So a lot depends on your market. However, just those are some things to be cautious about is, does the customer understand the fee? Can management explain the fee when they get asked about it? And making sure that your team is on a very good terms in terms of understanding what they're going to explain when somebody asks about this fee. The move out fee, we don't see it it's not super common. However, I've seen it implemented at a decent amount of facilities, and it feels kind of like a last chance grab. Your tenants feel like it's a last chance grab at some money while they're on their way out. Now, I would say this is different than a cleaning fee, a clean out fee. A clean out fee is usually avoidable, right? The tenant can clean their unit out and they can avoid this fee. If you have a fee that is a standard move out fee that gets put on the last invoice that you give the tenant, again, you're giving your customers a bad taste in their mouth when they leave your facility, and you're probably not going to get as many repeat customers. And a lot of tenants end up becoming repeat customers. So you definitely don't want to kick your tenants in the butt on their way out. So those are just a couple of things to avoid and or be a little bit cautious about how you implement, how your team implements, and how your team can explain them to the customers. Because again, competition is getting more and more difficult in storage. There is getting to be, again, more demand. There's more supply available. The demand is changing a little bit. It's getting more expensive. Cost of living has gone up. Inflation. Everybody's feeling the changes in our market right now. And so your tenants are going to all of a sudden become a little bit more likely to say, it may be worth my Saturday to clean out my unit and move it down the street to get this 3-month move-in special. And I mean, we're seeing move-in specials all over the place. I mean, Public and them are bringing in 3 months free, 4 months, 6 months at half off. There are a lot of different larger discounts being offered during move-ins because companies are trying to lease up. Companies are trying to get their occupancy rates up to sell. There's a lot of different reasons behind these bigger and more elaborate move-in specials, but that's what you're going to be competing with, and your customers are definitely going to see those ads, and they are going to consider those things whenever they're looking at their monthly budget as funds and things get tighter within household incomes. So just a couple things to caution you on. Also, just some best practices. Just to kind of wrap up the thought is, make sure if you're implementing a fee, it makes sense to your customer. Give your customers a chance to avoid fees if at all possible. Don't just put them all on and require all of your fees to be paid. And make sure that the fee makes sense to your management team so they can explain it and you don't cause a management headache. The other thing to consider whenever you're doing this is make sure that the fee can be easily manageable through your software, and that you're not causing a lot of manual work for your team to try to implement these fees. If your software can't handle adding recurring invoice items and other things, and most of them can, make sure that your management team is set up with the best possible tools to be able to implement these fees whenever you guys decide to start charging them. And again, I know it's one of those things where in storage, I always hear the term, oh, I don't want to fee my tenants to death. Oh, my tenants feel like they're being overfeed. Tenants don't feel that way with avoidable fees. Tenants only feel that way when there are line items that are showing up on the invoice that they have no control over. And so just a line of caution there. Make sure you're giving your customers the best possible experience, because occupancy is going to get harder and harder to maintain to keep your tenants in your facility longer as supply keeps ramping up and as other companies are offering bigger and bigger discounts. So hopefully some of that information is helpful to you. If you guys are implementing other fees at your facility, I would love to hear about it. If you have other things that are working for your business, I'm happy to have a conversation. Shoot me an email, put a comment in of what's working at your facility, and be happy to talk about those things. Or if anything that I mentioned on the podcast today, you've tried it and didn't experience what I've mentioned as far as had some issues with it, I'm happy to hear about those things as well. We are always trying to gain knowledge and provide the best information possible to storage owners as we try to help you guys build the most profitable storage business you can. So look forward to the next episode, and have a great day out there. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning into the podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. This episode was brought to you by CC Storage. CC Storage is a property management software that can be utilized by your business at no cost to you. Pass the fees for credit card processing onto your tenants, increase your business's revenue, no software fees, no contracts, no per unit costs, no surprises. So hope you check out CC Storage as the sponsor of our podcast, and we hope you tune in to the next episode. Thank you.